It's great to welcome back to the program today Bill Scher, contributor to the Washington Monthly, Politico, and RealClearPolitics, also host of the history podcast, When America Worked. Bill, always great to have you on, and we're welcoming your dog today as well.
Yes, if you can see in the corner here, Nova is chewing on some plastic.
Yes.
Hopefully they'll keep her occupied.
Let's hope so. So let's just start with the outlook for the next 2 years. I mean, interesting Wall Street Journal op-ed yesterday about Republicans being too dim-witted to really wield the power that they're going to have, and how they're fighting over McCarthy, and it's just kind of becoming a mess. Of course, Republicans will narrowly control the House. They will not control the Senate. It looked like the Senate would be 51-49, and it sort of is, although Kyrsten Sinema now says she's going to be an independent, but seemingly will not dramatically change how she plans to vote. I think maybe, although I'm not completely sure about that. So, what is anything going to happen in the next 2 years legislatively that is significant?
I mean, you know me, David. I'm a fairly optimistic person, but I'm saying my expectations very, very low for
Yeah.
this Congress. I mean, if they can keep the lights on and avoid a debt default, congratulations.
Yeah.
This system still works.
If there is a utility for 24 for each party from what does or doesn't happen over the next 2 years, it seems clear that Republicans are going to want to make the case in 24 that Democrats didn't get anything done in this 2 year period, and that things got worse. That may be by their own doing, of course, as often is in politics. Is that the type of thing that is likely to swing a presidential election like the one we would see in 24, a sort of referendum on what Democrats got done when they held one of two houses and had Joe Biden in the White House? Or is that just not likely to be a very impactful argument 2 years, 23 months from now?
Well, generally speaking, assuming Biden runs and Biden
Yes.
is the nominee,
Yes.
you would assume that 2024 will be a referendum on him. I mean, that's typically how re-elections go. And something that I talked about over the course of the past year, midterms are not really referendums on the president. That's a bit of a misnomer.
Yep.
And I think that has been borne out in this past year, because Biden's approval was not good. But midterms. I mean, this is not a settled argument, but there is an argument that I've embraced, that they're about balance, and an electorate trying to balance things out from the past election and kind of keep things roughly in the middle, which is why the opposition party tends to do well, irrespective of presidential approval. And that didn't happen this time, I would argue, because the balancing choice was the Democrats, because Republicans put up candidates who were essentially imbalanced and were doing disruptive things, and that spooked much of the electorate. And it speaks to an intra-party conflict with the Republicans. Mitch McConnell, whom Democrats looked at as obstructionist extraordinaire, had a different take on how to handle Joe Biden in the past 2 years, which was, let's have a modicum of cooperation. I hate shutdowns. Shutdowns always make us look bad. Let's do the bare minimum. Let's do the infrastructure. Let's do the semiconductor investments to compete with China. Let's partner on Ukraine. And we can fight Democrats on a bunch of other things where we think they're going too far to the left. And the Trump forces didn't subscribe to that. They were mad at McConnell for being as cooperative as he was. They put up a slate of Senate candidates who were totally out to lunch, who were caught up on election denial and other culture war type things. And that gave room for the Democrats to say, look, we're trying to keep things on the straight and narrow here. And these people want to, break all the China. So now you're going into a Congress where, again, Mitch McConnell can't dictate what the party strategy is, because you have this narrowly controlled House. Although I should caveat here, we don't even know who the speaker is going to be.
Correct.
So, if it's Kevin McCarthy, and if Kevin McCarthy is beholden to the far right, then you have this open question: can you keep the lights on? Can you avoid a government shutdown? Can you raise the debt limit to avoid a global economic destroying debt default? That becomes a big unknown. If the anti-McCarthy faction makes it impossible for McCarthy to get the 218 he needs. There's this threat from the moderate splinter faction of the Republican Party, led by Don Bacon. At least Don Bacon's been the one who's been most vocal about this, saying if these guys push us too far, we'll partner with Democrats and put up a bipartisan speaker, be a Republican, but someone who's not beholden to the far right. And if that's the case, then maybe we're open for business. Then maybe we actually can pass a few things. And maybe McConnell would be willing to do some bare minimum stuff again, so Republicans don't seem like they're insane.
On the Kyrsten Sinema situation, there's basically every analysis under the sun. This was done and timed in a way just to upset Democrats, which doesn't seem to... I mean, it seems strategically like it leaves a little something to be desired in terms of an explanation. There's the Arizona explanation, which is Sinema was facing a challenge from a progressive Democrat. By becoming an independent, she's able to short circuit that possibility and maybe turn it into a three-way race in which the incumbent independent easily wins re-election in Arizona. That's another possibility. 3 is she just really wants attention. And when it's 51-49, the way to get attention back is to at least threaten that maybe it's actually 50-50 again. What's your best assessment of the timing and the decision?
I'm someone who has defended Sinema over the course of the past years. She's arguably the most effective legislature the Democrats have had. I know the counter argument is, well, she kneecapped their dream agenda, so don't give her credit for passing something smaller. But part of that argument was that it was impossible to get to 60 on things. McConnell wouldn't let you get to 60 on infrastructure or gun safety or the Electoral Count Act or what have you. And that proved not to be true. Sinema was the person doing those deals, actually doing the negotiations and finding the common ground. So I think she deserves credit for that. And I think she has taken away the wrong lesson from that experience. She was able to do what she did because she could bank on 50 Democrats,
right,
for whatever compromise she hashed out, because there was an intrinsic, parties tend to be favorable to their incumbents, assuming they're going to be the nominees. That Arizona is a closely divided state. A Democrat can't guarantee to win a statewide election there. If she's your best bet, you will go along with her on her deals in hopes that she keeps that seat for Democrats. Now, maybe she's not. She won't be the Democratic nominee. Maybe Democrats can put up a nominee that can be competitive in a three-way race. And so it puts Democrats in an awkward position with her. And so her deals, the challenge her before was convincing 10 Republicans, this is in your interest. It is better for you to do this infrastructure deal or do this gun safety deal than it is not. I know we're going to fight on election day, but you'll be in a worse position if you fight me on this, which is hard enough. But she did that. Now she has to fight a two-front war to pass any kind of deal. And again, mind you, we don't even know what kind of situation the House is going to be in, if it's going to be hospitable to deals. Her political value is, I'm the person that gets things done. If she's no longer that person, then she has a harder argument to make. And so if I was advising her a month ago, I'd say, you know what? Why don't you wait and see what happens with the speaker's race?
Right.
Why don't you wait and see if you can get a couple more deals under your belt for election day? Why don't you do a little outreach to the Democrats in Arizona and say, hey, look, this is where my thinking's at. There are other Democrats that break ranks from time to time and to have nearly as much upset with the base as Sinema does in Arizona, because she hasn't done that outreach. And so I hate to play, armchair psychologist with this stuff, but you look at the recent reporting that the Washington Post did on this, which suggests that this was sort of in the making for a long time. And I just kind of come down to, I just think I don't like the attention argument, because quite frankly, she doesn't do a lot of media. I think she does a lot of things that don't attract attention. But I do think she likes being a party of one. She likes following her own compass. She doesn't like having to play the footsie with the elements in the base that don't get what she's doing. And so she made a decision that's comfortable for her, but I don't necessarily think is the right strategy, both legislatively and politically.
I am no Sinema fan by any means, but I do find interesting that for a while now, there have been a lot of people saying Sinema shouldn't be in the Democratic Party because she's not really a Democrat. You hear sometimes the same thing about Joe Manchin. The people who didn't want her to be a Democrat have sort of won in the sense that now she isn't a Democrat, but now they're still mad. And there's like something interesting about that. But as I've said before, when people talk about you got to primary Joe Manchin with a progressive, if a progressive defeats Joe Manchin in a primary in West Virginia, I don't see any way that progressive wins. I think that seat becomes a Republican seat. Mm-hmm. Arizona's dynamics are different than West Virginia, and an actual bona fide three-way race is a very different situation than Manchin being primaried by a progressive. But there is some state-level strategy here that is at least a little more connected to reality than the West Virginia Manchin thing, it seems to me.
Well, yes and no. I mean, obviously, Arizona's not as red as West Virginia is.
Yeah.
Now, progressives have challenged Manchin in primaries. Manchin stomps them and
yes.
goes on to win. Look, Arizona, if it's blue, it is just barely blue. Even this past election, look, Democrats managed to win governor and Senate, but not House.
Right.
The House popular vote was Republican, and even if you make some estimates, because there are a couple of uncontested races, even if you use some estimates there, Republicans would still have an edge in the popular vote. Republicans put up truly insane candidates for a swing state and got burned. If they learned their lesson and put up, center-right candidates, you can't count on any old Democrat holding on to any seat in Arizona. So the notion that, yes, Sinema's numbers are bad. And I think she did things that I think her issue set is perfectly fine for Arizona. I think her legislative success is excellent for Arizona. I think the optics she's chosen to do along with it have been terrible and somewhat self-sabotaging. And so it puts her in a precarious position. But if you get Ruben Gallego or Greg Stanton, and that person can get, 30, a three race is just such a jump ball.
Yeah.
Because you have no idea. First, you have no idea, are you getting a Carrie Lake or a Doug Ducey type on the Republican side? That's a huge difference. And we really don't know. You can't look at a poll today and really know how much does Sinema pull from the center right and the center left. I wouldn't be optimistic about it, to be honest, because you look at the races where independents have won, typically speaking, one party's candidate just tanks.
Right.
Making it easier for the independent to pick up the lion's share of one party's votes. There are a couple of ones I'm aware of where an independent won with credible Republican Democratic candidates. One is Angus King in Maine when he ran, and he won that governor's race by a hair. And then when he ran for Senate, it was much easier for him. But you're talking getting in the upper 30s to win that kind of race. The other one is Jesse Ventura, governor of Minnesota, one I know a little bit more about. The fascinating about the Jesse Ventura race is the main reason why he won was same-day registration.
Right.
70% of his vote was same-day registrants. And who were they? 20-something white male wrestling fans. Like, it's not a typical kind of race that you can model anything else after. So, Sinema is an idiosyncratic case because she's an incumbent. And I'm not saying she can't pull it off, but it's a real roll of the dice. And I would say I think you could do better mending some fences with your Democratic base so you can win that primary. It's very unusual to lose a primary if you're a Senate incumbent. So I think with little elbow grease, she could have done that and made her life easier. But obviously, she made her choices.
Well, I don't really make predictions, but I will predict that Sinema's fate will not be to be in Baja California off the grid, surfing and doing conspiracy theories like Jesse Ventura ended up after his gubernatorial run. Bill Scher, contributor to Washington Monthly, Politico, RealClearPolitics, and also host of the history podcast When America Worked. Bill, always a pleasure having you on.
Same here. Take care. Happy holidays.